Welcome to the Catalyst Sale Podcast. Whether you are a sales professional, not in sales but interested in helping people solve problems, or a founder, CEO who is looking to grow your business, you'll find practical tools, stories, and experience you can apply to your role. I'm your host, Jody Mayberry, and I'm here with Mike Simmons, the co-founder of Catalyst Sale. Mike, it's that time of year again. Do you want to take a guess at what I'm talking about?
I have no idea. That time of year again. Halloween costumes?
If you lived anywhere other than Arizona, maybe I'd say it's time to get out the sweaters, but I don't think you probably ever have to wear a sweater in Arizona. It's the time of the year where we start to look back. We start to reflect on how the year has gone, how did we do compared to what we thought, and prepare for the upcoming year. And I would even say there's a third piece, because when we get to this point of the year, I have found people quite often do two things. They either say, my goodness, I kind of blew it, I'm not going to reach my goals, and they coast. Or they think, I did really well this year, and they coast. Or maybe a third option is, the holidays are upon us, there's so much going on, and they kind of coast. And so I want to do an episode where we point at that. We reflect on the year. Yes, we get ready for the next year. And also you give us what we need to make sure we do not finish the year coasting.
Well, I think you highlighted or reinforced a point that we've talked before, and we've joked around about whether, you carrying a bag and what that means. And just that intro reminds me that you've not had a quota, because this is the time of year for those people who are really successful, those people who are having a really good year. This is when they really should pour gas on it and push the pedal down and do all the other things that you think about when you say, hey, I want to be really aggressive and move things forward, because they're now moving into their accelerators from a compensation perspective. So that we've got this other group of sales pros that are out there who have had a really good year, and they should be eating or hunting faster while the getting is good. They're in their higher earning potential months. So we've got that group as well.
Well, see, now you're right. I've never carried a bag. And so I've not been in that group that requires quotas. And so I'm reflecting on, I guess, my own experience from people I have worked with and dealt with. So let's go start with reflecting on the year so far. What's important about that, and what should we be looking at?
I hope at this point in time last year, or even a couple of months earlier last year, you had established some goals for 2018. And those are some high level goals. You wrote them down on a whiteboard, or you wrote them down in your OneNote, or you put them in your journal, or you just identified, these are some of the things I want to accomplish. This is a great time of year to reflect back and say, of those things that I put out there, how many of them did I actually knock off? How many of them can I cross out? Or what success did I have? How did I move the ball further down the field? And now I'm getting into sports cliches, but how do I move through these things that I wanted to do, where I said, looking at 2018, if I can do these things, I'll be successful. And when I set goals, I think of them from the standpoint of mind. I think of body. I think of finances, and I think of family. Those are the four kind of broader categories that I'll look at. But I would look at your notes from last year and say, okay, what did I do? What I said I was going to do? Did I actually accomplish these things? The other thing I'd want to look at is, what else did I add over the course of the year? Did I add additional objectives or things that I wanted to accomplish? Because as Lee will talk about, this planning happens all the time. It happens on a weekly basis. It happens on a daily basis. It happens on a quarterly basis. It happens on an annual basis. So I'd want to go back through and say, okay, what else did I add? And then the third thing I'd want to look at is, if I look across the year, where did I fail and where did I succeed most? So were there periods of time where I was losing sleep? Like, were some quarters a little bit harder, some months a little bit harder? How are those patterns starting to reveal themselves, so that as I think of 2019, I know that when I set some of these really big goals and really big objectives, I plan them out or space them out in a way that I'll actually be able to execute. Like, if I know that, for whatever reason, September is a rough month for working out, or is a rough month for closing business, or a rough month for whatever, probably should not set a high level objectives around growth objectives around the things that I'm working on in that given month.
So how have you done? We're at this point in the year where we're reflecting back. When you look back, what do you say about how your year has gone?
Well, I look back and I wanted to bring on 5 new Catalyst sale customers. And we brought on a couple. Well, we've not hit 5. We've got some pretty good opportunities out there. So from an overall, from that part of the business, part of the mark, but not completely executed. So I would chalk that up to a failure, but definitely some lessons learned as we've gone through the process. On a positive note, if you look at things like growth in the podcast and number of people that we've exposed the podcast to, everything's up and to the right. So we're doing some really exciting things on that end. If you look at things like, from a fitness perspective, am I at my objective? No, I'm a little short on that. But if you look at family vacations and trips and connection, really good. So some things good, some things not so good, some things where I probably could have set higher level objectives. So overall, the way I look at it is I'm on this side of dirt. I'm still in the game. So the year's been a good year, and next year is going to be an even better year. And I think that's another thing that we've focused some time and attention on. We realized as much as we talk about pipeline development and coach people on building pipeline, we got so focused on working with individual customers toward the back end of last year and beginning part of this year that we weren't building out that pipeline, which ultimately impacted that ability to bring on those additional customers. But we've got some really good things that we're working on from a business development standpoint, some initiatives that we're involved in, where we're giving back to certain areas of the community. And I think that those will potentially open up some really interesting opportunities for us.
This is maybe already bleeding over into preparing for next year. But when you are setting yourself up for the year and setting your goals and determining what you want to do, by now, Mike, you've got to realize opportunities come up that you never could have imagined. And I actually plan for that. And by plan for that, I mean, I don't do any planning. I just understand something's going to happen in the next year that I don't know about. I can't even imagine it yet, but it's likely going to happen. Do you build that into what you do when you plan for the next year? Like if Catalyst Sale had a tremendous opportunity that came up in 2019, but you had yourself so scheduled out that you couldn't take it on, right? So that's what I'm getting at. How do you plan for opportunities that might come up in the year that you don't know what they are?
Yeah, I mean, one of the questions that I like to ask is, what's the worst that can happen? And I know in this instance, what we're talking about is ideally good opportunity. But you can also look at the other side of that question, which is, what is the best thing that can happen? And I think many early stage companies fall into the trap of being so focused on the day-to-day business. And we'll do this as sales reps too, right? So we will focus on the stuff that's coming in, the urgent, but not necessarily important stuff. And from a time perspective, we get caught in that trap. When I think of what you're describing and these important things of, hey, there are going to be opportunities that we don't expect that are just going to pop up. And when I look at those are the things that will create significant growth inside the organization that are not anticipated. But I'm also not dependent on the success of the business or the ability to survive based on those things coming in. Because sometimes those things don't come in, and sometimes the timing is off. So to get to your point of, hey, what happens if this great opportunity comes along, but we're so taxed with other things that we're working on? Well, we've got a couple of different ways that we can scale quickly based on the patterns that we've identified inside the marketplace and the things that we see across all organizations. There are things that we're working on today with organizations that we work with. And I think all of this applies to those who are listening out there too, whether you're talking about your own territory or you're talking about projects that you're managing. But there are things that you're working on today where, if something else came up, if some other opportunity came up, you could offload, you could train someone, you could ramp somebody up to take care of those tasks. So what I try to do, Jody, in that instance is I try to think of what are some of the things that I'm doing on a day in, day out basis that I could have somebody else on a team do. And actually, they might actually accelerate some of the growth in those areas if we're able to bring in the additional headcount. But I don't let the bluebird or the surprise or the wishful thinking or the jackpot type stuff influence my general strategic planning. Does that answer the question?
Yes. Yes, it does. It does. And now I'm going to bounce back to reflecting on the past year, because there's so much that goes into this time of the year as you're trying to look back and look forward. If we're falling short on a goal, we've still got time left in the year, but it doesn't look like we're going to hit one of our goals. How do you approach that?
Well, from a sales perspective, as an example, let's say that I'm 30% below plan. And to cover that 30%, I'm going to use simple numbers. I have to generate $300,000. So my plan is $1 million. And I know that my average deal size is 100K. Again, I'm using simple numbers, and I know we're getting into some math here, but I've got a target of $1 million for the year. I'm 30% below plan, so I've only generated $700,000 for the year. My average deal size is 100K, and my average length of sale is 90 to 120 days. Well, by the time this podcast goes live, we're already past the 90 and 120 days. So the likelihood that I'm going to be able to get something new in that time period is probably pretty low. But my expectation is I'm going to survive. I'm going to make it through the year. I'm going to survive to the next year. So now I've got to shift that mindset and start thinking about, okay, well, how do I make sure that I'm set up for this next quarter, the first quarter of the year? It's really hard to do because there's a lot of pressure, and you're going to have sales managers out there who are going to ask you, hey, is there anything you can move forward? Is there anything you can pull in? And all you're doing there is you're robbing from Peter to pay Paul, and you're negatively impacting what the next year looks like. Now, if you're in a situation where you're 70% below plan and you're in danger of losing your job, I'd start looking for a new job. And I know that's pretty harsh, but if I'm sitting at $250K on $1 million number, and I know that it's a sales-based organization and there are going to be their decisions will be made, I'd identify those opportunities and I'd try to find a new job before moving into the next year.
When I asked you how your year has gone, you started talking about Catalyst Sale and how the business has done. And then you moved into fitness and you moved into family. How important is it to focus as well on fitness and family and these other things outside of just sales, just work when you're setting goals?
I mean, I think all of those things make us the person that we are, right? I mean, we get into these situations. So if this meat bag that I'm living in is not fit or can't stay on this side of dirt, then I'm going to have a really hard time supporting the family, and I'm going to have a really hard time moving the business forward. So I've got to be okay with mindfulness and general fitness, and make sure that I'm in the game, so to speak. So that's where the mind and body stuff really comes into play. On the family side, if you're so trapped in the day-to-day work and you lose sight of that larger part of life, and that changes over time. So there was a time period where Jen and I didn't have kids. Now we have kids. There was a time period where Jen wasn't in my life. Now Jen is in my life, right? So as you go through those things in that transition, you start to move the meter left or right, and start to figure out, are my priorities 100% on work, or are they 100% or 50% on work and 50% on mind and body? Are they 30? Is it 33%, 33%, 33%? But over time, that is going to evolve. That measure is going to evolve. You've got to lean on those who are in your life to help evaluate that. So I think having balance is really important. I'm extremely fortunate, but I absolutely love what I'm doing. So with that helps to create or improve the level of balance. If I was going in and punching a clock every day and hated what I was doing, that would be extremely frustrating. I wouldn't do it for a very long time.
Yeah. I think you're right on. You've got to look at the whole thing. If things aren't good at home and if things aren't good with your health, they're likely not going to go well with work as well. And I know I talk about Lee Cockerell often, but I spend a lot of time with him and he speaks into my life a lot. So quite often when examples come up, and I remember he told me one time that Bill Marriott once said to him, Lee, you know why I don't have any problems at work? And Lee said, why is that? And Bill Marriott said, because I don't have any problems at home. And I think that just drives in the point that if you want to do well at work, don't neglect home. Don't neglect your health. Don't neglect who you are outside of work, because I know people talk a lot about work-life balance, but they're not separate. It's not like you can balance work with your life. It's all the same and it all spills over. And so I like that when I asked you how the year went, of course you talked about Catalyst Sale, but then you went right into the rest of who Mike Simmons is. And it's really important to keep that in mind, both as you reflect on how the year went and as you're setting yourself up for the new year.
Absolutely.
Well, Mike, is there anything else you think we need to take a look at? First, either reflecting back or two, preparing for the upcoming year?
Yeah, I think the thing that I would focus on, or I'd ask the audience to focus on, is figure out what your buckets are. I talked about mind, body, finances, family as 4 of the major buckets. And then as you think of those buckets, figure out what your KPIs are, your key performance indicators are, that help you to determine, am I actually making progress in each of those areas? And also think about what your goals and general objectives. What are the things that are really going to advance you forward from a mind perspective, body perspective, finance perspective, family perspective, like if those are your buckets. And then continue to, throughout the year, not just one time a year, not just in the strategic planning phase of the year where you're in September, October and trying to figure out what next year looks like, but throughout the year, revisit those buckets and figure out what percentage of time needs to be focused on each one of those and where some things might be out of whack, and what are some of the easy things you can do to address each one of those buckets to make a significant impact on success. In the health side of things, it might be losing a little bit of weight. Losing a little bit of weight solves some pretty interesting problems. In the family perspective, it might be spending more time outside of the house and in gaining experiences. In the work side of things, it might be something different. It might be engaging in a project that stretches your skill set. But look at the buckets, evaluate where you are, establish some clear goals, figure out some data to help you measure whether or not you're going to be successful. And then that last piece is be okay with letting go. Be okay with deciding it's time to exit if a scenario or a situation is not the right one for you.
That's good. And that can be one of the most important things you do this year is exit something that's not right for you. And I think that can help take care of some of the other problems you're having in many areas too. Well,
yeah, absolutely. I mean, Jody, and just one more point on that. I mean, you do not simplify things by adding more things to your plate. You simplify by taking away. You create complexity by adding. So simplify.
Simplify. That is a great note to end the episode on, and a great note to end the year on. As you look at how the year went and you're getting ready for the next one, maybe you had too much going on. Maybe that's exactly what you need to do, is to simplify. Well, Mike, I always enjoy this time of year when we get to do this episode. I think maybe we've done it every year, haven't we? Haven't we done a kind of a wrap-up year episode like this?
Every year. Yep. It's important. And I'm, for those who are bag carrying reps, one of the practices that helped me historically is I would always have a sense for where my number was going to come from by about June of the previous year. And we've talked about that before, but yep, every year we do it, and it's just important to reflect. And this is where journaling and note taking and using whiteboards and all the other tools that many of us use out there really can help. So take time and reflect.
Wonderful. Take time and reflect. Thank you so much, Mike. And if you found this episode interesting, if you like what's going on here, just share it with somebody else. And also, if you haven't done so yet, find us on iTunes and leave a rating and a review. That helps other people find the show, and it makes Mike really happy. And when Mike's happy, we always have great episodes. So thank you so much, Mike, and thank you for listening to the Catalyst Sale Podcast.